My name is Nadine, and I'm 32 years old. I'll never forget the day I signed the contract with my contractor to build my dream home. I had been planning this project for years, and finally, it was becoming a reality. I had chosen a beautiful plot of land in Kingston, with a stunning view of the Blue Mountains. My vision was to build a modern, eco-friendly home that would be my sanctuary. I had spent countless hours designing every detail, from the floor plan to the fixtures and fittings. I was so excited to see my dream take shape. I had hired a contractor, Rohan Wilson, who came highly recommended by friends. He seemed professional, reliable, and enthusiastic about the project. I trusted him completely, and I thought I had made the right decision. Little did I know, my trust would be shattered in ways I never thought possible. As I look back, I realized that the journey to building my dream home would become a journey of betrayal, heartache, and ultimately growth. I'm still trying to process everything that happened, but I'm here to share my story with you in the hope that it might serve as a warning to others, or perhaps offer some solace to those who may be going through similar experiences. I met Rohan Wilson at his office in Halfway Tree. He was a tall, dark-skinned man with a charming smile. We sat down, and he showed me his portfolio. I was impressed with his work. He had built homes for several prominent Jamaicans, and I felt confident in his abilities. "So, Nadine, tell me about your project," Rohan said, leaning forward. "I want to build a modern, eco-friendly home on my plot of land in Kingston," I replied. "I've designed every detail, but I need someone to bring it to life." Rohan nodded, taking notes. "I love the design. We can definitely work with that. Let's discuss the budget and timeline." We went over the details, and Rohan provided a breakdown of the costs. I was a bit surprised by the estimate, but he assured me it was a fair price. We shook hands, and he promised to start work immediately. Over the next few days, Rohan and his team began clearing the land and preparing the foundation. I visited the site regularly, and Rohan would update me on the progress. He seemed professional and knowledgeable, and I felt reassured that I had made the right choice. One day, I asked Rohan about the materials he planned to use. "I've sourced high-quality materials that fit your budget," he said. "Don't worry, Nadine, your home will be built to last." I nodded, feeling confident in Rohan's expertise. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice small inconsistencies in the work. I pushed the thoughts aside, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. Rohan would often call me to update me on the progress, and we would chat about the project. He seemed friendly and enthusiastic, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. One afternoon, I received a call from Rohan. "Nadine, I need to talk to you about the budget," he said. "There's been a slight increase in costs due to unforeseen circumstances." I was taken aback, but Rohan assured me it was nothing to worry about. "We'll discuss it further when I see you on site tomorrow," he said. I agreed, and we hung up. As I looked at the project timeline, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Was this project going to be more complicated than I thought? I pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the excitement of building my dream home, but little did I know, my trust in Rohan would soon be tested in ways I never imagined. Over the next few weeks, Rohan and I worked closely together on the project. We would meet on site regularly to discuss progress and make decisions. I was impressed with his knowledge and expertise. He seemed to understand my vision perfectly. One day, Rohan asked me about my design choices. "Nadine, why did you choose this particular style for the kitchen?" he asked. "I wanted it to be modern and sleek," I replied. "I love clean lines and minimal ornamentation." Rohan nodded. "I agree, it will look great. We can make sure the cabinets are custom-made to fit your design." As we worked together, I started to appreciate Rohan's professionalism. He was always prepared and on time. We would discuss everything from the foundation to the roofing, and he would provide valuable insights. I began to trust Rohan completely. I would call him with questions or concerns, and he would reassure me that everything was under control. He would send me updates and photos of the progress, and I was excited to see my home taking shape. Rohan would often invite me to visit the site, and I would walk through the construction site, marveling at the transformation. He would point out different features and explain the construction process. One afternoon, Rohan asked me to meet him on site to discuss the electrical wiring. "Nadine, I want to make sure everything is perfect," he said. "Let's go over the plans together." As we pored over the plans, I felt confident that Rohan understood my vision. He seemed to care about the project, and I appreciated his attention to detail. As the weeks turned into months, Rohan and I developed a strong working relationship. I would often joke with him about the project, and he would laugh and reassure me that everything would be fine. "Nadine, don't worry. Your home will be beautiful," he would say. I started to feel comfortable around Rohan. I would ask him about his family, and he would tell me about his wife and kids. He seemed like a good guy, and I was grateful to have him working on my project. But as the project progressed, I began to notice that Rohan was sometimes evasive about certain aspects of the construction. When I would ask him specific questions, he would change the subject or tell me not to worry. I pushed the thoughts aside, thinking maybe I was just being too cautious. After all, Rohan had a good reputation, and I had no reason to doubt him. I continued to trust him, and the project moved forward. Rohan would often tell me about the challenges he faced on other projects. "Some clients don't understand the construction process," he would say. "But you're different, Nadine. You're hands-on and knowledgeable." I appreciated his compliments, and I felt like we were working together as a team. But little did I know, my trust in Rohan would soon be tested in ways I never expected. As the construction continued, I would visit the site regularly. One day, I noticed that some of the materials looked different from what I had specified. I asked Rohan about it, and he reassured me that they were equivalent or better. "Trust me, Nadine," he said. "I know what I'm doing." I nodded, feeling a bit uncertain. But I had no reason to doubt Rohan. Not yet, anyway. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about Rohan. At first, it was just a nagging sense of doubt, but as time went on, I started to notice little things that didn't add up. He would sometimes be evasive about certain aspects of the construction, or change the subject when I asked specific questions. One day, I decided to visit the site unannounced, and what I saw made my heart sink. The materials they were using were substandard, and the workers seemed disorganized. I felt a knot in my stomach as I realized that Rohan might not be the trustworthy contractor I thought he was. I approached him calmly, trying not to accuse him outright. "Rohan, can we talk about the materials?" I asked. He smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Nadine. These are good quality. You'll see, the final product will be great." But I wasn't convinced. I asked him to show me the specifications, and he hesitated before handing them over. As I scanned the documents, my doubts grew. The materials they were using were not what we had agreed on. "Rohan, these aren't the materials we specified," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He shrugged. "They're equivalent, Nadine. Don't worry, it will be fine." I wasn't sure what to believe. Part of me wanted to trust Rohan, but another part was screaming that something was wrong. I decided to do some research to see if I could find any reviews or complaints about his work. As I dug deeper, I discovered that several people had filed complaints against Rohan's company, citing shoddy workmanship and dishonesty. My heart sank further. How could I have been so blind? I thought back to our conversations, to the way he had won me over with his charm and expertise. It all seemed so genuine at the time, but now I wondered if it was just a facade. I knew I had to take action, but I wasn't sure what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Rohan directly, while another part wanted to seek advice from a lawyer or a trusted friend. As I stood there, weighing my options, I couldn't help but think of the phrase, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face," It was a line from Macbeth, a play about deception and betrayal. I felt like King Duncan, trusting and naive, unaware of the treachery that lay beneath the surface. 1. I took a deep breath and decided to call a lawyer to get advice on how to proceed. As I waited for the call to connect, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was in for a wild ride. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey to uncover the truth about Rohan and his company. I was going through my project files when I stumbled upon a discrepancy in the material invoices. The quantities didn't match what Rohan had told me, and the prices seemed higher than what we had agreed on. I felt a growing sense of unease as I dug deeper, my mind racing with questions. I decided to visit the site and confront Rohan about the discrepancies. When I arrived, he was nowhere to be found, but one of the workers approached me. "Miss Nadine, Rohan's not here right now. He's gone to pick up some materials," the worker said. I asked the worker about the materials they were using, and he hesitated before speaking. "We're using some materials from another project, ma'am. Rohan said it's okay." My unease turned to alarm. "What do you mean from another project?" I asked. The worker looked around nervously before leaning in. "Well, ma'am, we've been using some of your materials on other projects. Rohan said it's just a little something on the side." I felt my world crashing down around me. "What do you mean? How much material has he taken?" The worker shook his head. "I don't know, ma'am, but it's been going on for a while. I've seen him selling some of the materials to other contractors." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked the worker if he had any proof, and he nodded. "I have some photos on my phone, ma'am. Would you like to see them?" I nodded, and the worker showed me the photos. They were pictures of my materials being used on other construction sites. I felt betrayed and angry. "Thank you for telling me," I said to the worker. "I appreciate your honesty." The worker nodded and returned to work. I stood there, trying to process what I had just learned. I couldn't understand why Rohan would do something like this. We had a contract, and he was getting paid a fair price for his work. I decided to call Rohan and confront him about the theft. When he answered, I asked him to meet me at the site. "I need to talk to you about something," I said. Rohan agreed to meet me, and I waited for him to arrive. When he got to the site, I showed him the photos and asked him to explain. He looked at the photos and then at me. "Nadine, I can explain," he said. But I wasn't interested in hearing his explanation. "You're fired," I said. "I want you off my property now." Rohan looked surprised, but he didn't argue. He packed up his things and left the site. I was left standing there, wondering what to do next. I knew I needed to report Rohan to the authorities and try to recover my stolen materials. I also needed to find a new contractor to finish the project. As I stood there, trying to gather my thoughts, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult process. But I was determined to see it through and get my dream home built. I walked onto the construction site, determined to confront Rohan about the missing materials. He was standing near the foundation, talking to one of his workers. When he saw me, he excused himself and walked over. "Nadine, what's going on?" he asked, his tone neutral. "I know what's going on," I said, my voice firm. "I know you've been stealing materials from me. I have proof." Rohan's expression didn't change, but he seemed to pause for a moment before responding. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "What proof do you have?" I pulled out the photos the worker had shown me and handed them to Rohan. He looked at them, his face expressionless. "These don't prove anything," he said. "These could be from any construction site." "Don't lie to me," I said. "I know it's my materials. I've been tracking the deliveries, and I know what's been going on." Rohan sighed and rubbed his temples. "Okay, fine. Maybe I did take some materials, but it was just a small mistake. It won't happen again." "A small mistake?" I repeated. "You call stealing thousands of dollars worth of materials a small mistake?" Rohan shrugged. "It was just a business decision. I didn't think it would hurt anyone." "It hurt me," I said. "You've been taking advantage of me from the beginning. I want you off my site now." Rohan looked at me, a hint of anger in his eyes. "You can't just fire me like that," he said. "We have a contract." "I don't care about the contract," I said. "I care about getting my project done honestly. You're not the right person for the job. Leave now and don't come back." Rohan's face reddened, and for a moment, I thought he might lose his temper. But then he seemed to calm down and he nodded. "Fine," he said. "I'll leave. But you're making a big mistake. You're going to regret this." I watched as Rohan packed up his tools and left the site. I knew I had made the right decision, but I also knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult process. I would have to find a new contractor, and I would have to deal with the fallout from Rohan's actions. As I stood there, watching Rohan leave, I realized that I had a lot of work ahead of me. I would have to review the contract and see what my options were. I would have to find a new contractor and make sure they were trustworthy. And I would have to deal with the financial implications of Rohan's actions. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number of my lawyer, ready to start the process of taking action against Rohan. As I waited for him to answer, I felt a sense of determination. I was going to get to the bottom of this, and I was going to make sure that Rohan paid for what he had done. I spent the next few days gathering evidence of Rohan's theft. I reviewed the invoices and compared them to the materials that had been delivered. I took photos of the materials that were supposed to be used on my project, and I documented every conversation I had with Rohan. I also spoke to the workers on the site, and they told me about the other projects Rohan had been working on simultaneously. They gave me the addresses of these projects, and I visited each site to see if I could find any of my materials. At each site, I took photos and notes, documenting every instance of my materials being used. I also spoke to the contractors and workers, asking them if they knew anything about Rohan's business practices. One contractor told me that Rohan had a reputation for being dishonest. "He's been known to cut corners and steal materials from his clients," the contractor said. Another worker told me that Rohan had been selling the stolen materials on the black market. "He's been making a lot of money off of this," the worker said. "I took all of this information and compiled it into a detailed report. I documented every instance of theft, every conversation I had with Rohan, and every piece of evidence I had collected. As I worked on gathering evidence, I realized that Rohan's theft was more extensive than I had initially thought. He had been stealing materials from me for months, and he had been using them to build homes for other clients. I also discovered that Rohan had been inflating the costs of the materials and keeping the difference for himself. He had been doing this for years, and several of his previous clients had filed complaints against him. With this new information, I felt confident that I had enough evidence to take Rohan to court. I made an appointment with my lawyer to discuss my options and decide on the best course of action. When I met with my lawyer, I gave him the report and all of the evidence I had collected. He reviewed it and nodded. "This is a strong case," he said. "We can take Rohan to court and sue him for damages." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. I knew that I had made the right decision in firing Rohan, and I was confident that justice would be served. My lawyer told me that we would need to file a police report and get a copy of the contract between me and Rohan. He also told me that we would need to gather more evidence, including financial records and witness statements. I left the lawyer's office feeling determined. I was going to see this through to the end, no matter how long it took. I was going to make sure that Rohan paid for what he had done. Over the next few weeks, I worked with my lawyer to gather more evidence and build a strong case against Rohan. We interviewed witnesses, reviewed financial records, and documented every instance of theft. As the case against Rohan grew stronger, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I knew that I had done the right thing in standing up to him, and I was confident that justice would be served. but I also knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. Rohan would fight back, and I would have to be prepared to defend myself. I steeled myself for the battle ahead, knowing that it would be a challenge. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I had the truth on my side. I was determined to see justice served, and I was willing to fight for it. I couldn't sleep, thinking about Rohan's betrayal. I kept replaying our conversations, wondering how I had missed the signs. I felt like I had been blind to the truth. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with questions. How could he do this to me? Why did he think he could get away with it? The next morning I woke up feeling drained. I didn't want to get out of bed, but I knew I had to keep moving forward. I got dressed and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. As I waited for the coffee to brew, I stared out the window, my mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. I thought about all the times Rohan had reassured me, all the times he had told me that everything was fine. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. How could he lie to me like that? How could he betray my trust? As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I heard a knock at the door. It was my best friend, Karen. She had come to check on me, sensing that something was wrong. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. But then I opened up to her, telling her everything. I told her about Rohan's theft, about the evidence I had gathered, and about the lawsuit. Karen listened attentively, her expression growing more and more shocked. When I finished talking, she hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Nadine," she said. "You're going to get through this. We'll get through it together." I appreciated her support, and it helped me feel a little better. But deep down, I knew that I still had a long way to go. I had to deal with the aftermath of Rohan's betrayal, and I had to find a way to move forward. Over the next few days, I struggled to come to terms with what had happened. I felt like I was in a fog, unsure of what to do next. But with Karen's help, I slowly started to clear my head. I began to focus on the task at hand, determined to see justice served. As I navigated the complex emotions swirling inside me, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for my own justice, I was fighting for my own sense of self-worth. I was fighting to prove to myself that I wasn't a fool, that I wasn't blind to the truth. With every passing day, I grew more determined. I was going to take Rohan down, and I was going to make sure he paid for what he had done. I was going to emerge from this ordeal stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of my lawyer. When he answered, I told him about Rohan's theft and the evidence I had gathered. "I need your help," I said. "I want to take action against Rohan." My lawyer listened attentively, asking questions and making notes. "We'll need to file a police report and gather more evidence," he said. "But I think we have a strong case." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Let's do it," I said. "I want to take Rohan to court." My lawyer agreed, and we made a plan to meet at the police station the next day. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of determination. I was going to take action, and I was going to make sure Rohan paid for what he had done. The next day, I met my lawyer at the police station. We filed a report, and the police officer took a statement from me. My lawyer handed over the evidence we had gathered, and the officer promised to investigate. As we left the police station, my lawyer told me that we would also need to contact the construction authorities and file a complaint against Rohan's license. "We'll make sure he can't hurt anyone else," he said. I nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. I was taking action, and I was going to make sure Rohan was held accountable. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly to build our case against Rohan. We gathered more evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared for the lawsuit. I also heard from other clients of Rohan's who had similar experiences. They came forward, sharing their stories and providing more evidence. As the case against Rohan grew stronger, I felt a sense of vindication. I knew I had made the right decision in standing up to him, and I was confident that justice would be served. Rohan's lawyer tried to contact me, offering a settlement, but I refused. I wanted to take this to court, and I wanted Rohan to face the consequences of his actions. My lawyer advised me that going to court would be a long and difficult process, but I was determined. I was going to see this through to the end, no matter what it took. With each passing day, I grew more confident. I knew I had the evidence, and I knew I had the law on my side. I was going to take Rohan down, and I was going to make sure he paid for what he had done. The battle ahead would be tough, but I was ready. I was ready to face Rohan in court, and I was ready to fight for justice. The day of the court hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom, my lawyer by my side. Rohan and his lawyer sat across from us. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. My lawyer presented our case, detailing Rohan's theft and deception. He showed the judge the evidence we had gathered, and the judge reviewed it carefully. Rohan's lawyer tried to defend him, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge asked Rohan questions, and he stumbled over his answers. Finally, the judge rendered his verdict. Rohan was found guilty of theft and breach of contract. The judge ordered him to pay damages and restitution. I felt a sense of satisfaction as the judge's words hung in the air. Justice had been served. Rohan's lawyer asked for a lenient sentence, but the judge was firm. Rohan would have to pay back the money he had stolen, and he would have to surrender his contractor's license. The judge's decision would serve as a warning to other contractors who might be tempted to engage in similar behavior. As we left the courtroom, my lawyer shook my hand. "You did the right thing," he said. "Justice was served." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. The ordeal was finally over. I could move on with my life, and I could start rebuilding my project. But as I looked at Rohan, I saw the devastation in his eyes. He had lost his business, his reputation, and his livelihood. He would have to start over, just like me. The difference was, I had learned a valuable lesson. I had learned to be vigilant, to trust my instincts, and to stand up for myself. Rohan, on the other hand, had lost everything due to his own actions. As I walked out of the courtroom, I knew that I was ready to move on. I was ready to start fresh, to build my dream home, and to put this chapter of my life behind me. The courtroom drama was over, but the real work was just beginning. I would have to find a new contractor, and I would have to oversee the construction of my home. But I was ready for the challenge. I was ready to take control of my project, and I was ready to see my dream become a reality. With the court's decision, I felt a sense of freedom. I was free to move on, to build my home, and to live my life. The resolution of the case marked a new beginning for me, and I was excited to see what the future held. This is the end of my story. Thank you for watching, and if you like this kind of content, kindly leave us a like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Thank you.